welcome to Nocturnal Tales. Tonight we're back in Chicago, where the snow looks like ash and the city does its best work in the dark. A bullet for the headlines follows Veronica Lakewood and Captain Hastings through hotel lobbies, police corridors, and cheap rooms with expensive secrets, after a dead girl is found with Veronica's old London calling card pinned to her dress, and a familiar room number begins turning up like a bad joke that someone is telling on purpose. This is a story about names used as bait, about clean-up squads who do their dirtiest work in the name of public virtue, and about what happens when a woman who once rewrote her own death refuses to let anyone else write the next chapter for her. As always, this tale is an homage to the great traditions of Golden Age and noir crime fiction, but every character, scene, and line you're about to hear is entirely our own creation. Veronica, Hastings, O'Rourke, and the city they move through are original to Nocturnal Tales, built in the shadow of those classics rather than borrowed from them. These long, fully produced mysteries exist thanks to listeners who support Nocturnal Tales on Patreon and through one-off tips on Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal. If you'd like to help future cases like this come to life, you can join us from $2.99 a month, or leave a tip whenever a particular story stays with you. Your support isn't a nice extra. It's what lets us keep writing and producing new stories at this length and quality, rather than scaling back or stopping altogether. All the links are in the description. Now settle in as Chicago's wind howls down the avenues, the city's clean men start arranging their mess in private, and Veronica Lakewood discovers that someone has been treating her name like a loaded weapon and expects her to play along. Chapter 1. The City Where Snow Looks Like Ash. Chicago does not pretend. London will lie to you with velvet ropes and polite coughs. Chicago simply puts its hand in your pocket and dares you to complain. In winter it is worse. Wind like a reprimand, streets like wet slate, and the lake sitting there in the dark like an old judge who has seen every excuse. We had been in America long enough for me to stop being surprised by the size of things, but not long enough to stop missing the English habit of shame. Veronica, of course, missed nothing. "You're staring," she said, not looking at me. "I'm observing," I corrected. She smiled into her coffee cup. We were in the lobby of the Blackstone, where the chandeliers tried desperately to civilize the air and failed. Men in heavy coats moved through the room with the impatient purpose of people who had either money to lose or no money at all, two conditions that make a man quick. Outside, Michigan Avenue was a gray corridor of motorcars and slush. Somewhere a streetcar complained. Somewhere else a saxophone was attempting to make heartbreak sound fashionable. "Why did you choose this place?" I asked. Veronica stirred her coffee slowly. "Because it's public." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer worth having," she replied. "Private rooms are where people do their best work." I knew what she meant. I also knew what I must not say. Veronica Lakewood had been a London problem once, glittering, dangerous, and impossible to hold. Some years ago, she had vanished with the kind of finality that only comes when a woman has planned it properly. London, always eager to be scandalized, had obligingly supplied its own tale: a beautiful jazz singer, a wealthy lover, a dramatic disappearance. The truth, at least the parts of it that I knew, was worse and better, and entirely Veronica. She had escaped London after framing that lover for her own murder and walking away with a small fortune in rich people's jewelry, pearls that had belonged to wives who never smiled, diamonds that had sat on throats like ownership. She had not merely run. She had rewritten the page and left the city reading the wrong chapter. That is Veronica's gift. She does not break rules. She changes the rules' handwriting. And now we sat in Chicago drinking coffee like ordinary people. Which was, on Veronica, always an act of sabotage. "Arthur," she said, still not looking at me, "you're thinking loudly." "I'm thinking rationally." She gave a small laugh. "Rationale is what men do when they're terrified." I was spared having to answer by the arrival of a bellboy, young, eager, with that Midwestern politeness that sounds like a hymn. "Miss Lane?" he asked. Veronica's face did not change, but her eyes sharpened. Yes. There it was, one of her names. In Chicago she was Vera Lane. A simple thing, easy to say, easy to forget. It was the kind of name that made a woman invisible until she chose to be seen. "There's a gentleman waiting for you," the boy said. "Says it's urgent." Veronica put down her spoon. "Does he?" "He's by the telephone desk. Dark coat, hat." Veronica rose, smoothing her skirt. "Stay here," she told me. "That's not happening." She glanced at me. "Arthur, for once, let me go alone." I stood too. "For once, don't ask." Her mouth tightened, annoyed, but not displeased. Veronica likes loyalty, provided it doesn't interfere with her plans. We crossed the lobby together. The telephone desk sat beneath a brass lamp that made everyone look slightly guilty. A man waited there with his back half-turned, as though even standing still was something he disliked. He was tall, broad in the shoulders, hair cut close, jaw like it had been assembled for arguments. He wore a dark overcoat that had seen too much weather and a fedora pulled low. In his face was that particular American expression of enforced patience, the kind you see on policemen and bouncers and men who have never been forgiven for being strong. When he turned, his eyes went to Veronica first, then to me, and stayed on me just long enough to decide I was inconvenient. "Miss Lane," he said. His voice was gravel and cigarettes. "Name's O'Leary. Chicago Police. Vice and Intelligence." Veronica did not offer her hand. "That's a very long way of saying you're paid to look away." O'Leary's expression did not move. "Funny. You're a long way from where you started, aren't you?" Veronica's smile arrived, cool, polished, almost friendly. "People start everywhere." He flicked his gaze to me. "And you're the, what, brother, bodyguard, husband?" "I'm Captain Hastings," I said, "and I don't recommend guessing." O'Leary nodded as though I had confirmed a suspicion. "English." "Is that a crime in Chicago?" I asked. "Not yet," he said. "But it'll get you hurt if you keep announcing it." Veronica leaned her hip lightly against the desk, as if this were a casual conversation and not a man attempting to place her on a board. "What do you want, Mr. O'Leary?" she asked. He took a folded photograph from his coat and slid it across the desk without ceremony. No envelope, no sensitivity. Americans have a brutal honesty about evidence. They expect you to deal with it. I picked it up before Veronica could. A young woman lay on a floor that looked like a cheap apartment, cracked linoleum, a chair on its side, a curtain hanging wrong. Her hair was dark. Her mouth was open slightly, as if she had just understood something too late. Pinned to her dress, pinned like a label on a parcel, was a calling card. Veronica Lakewood. For a moment the lobby noise fell away. I heard only the distant hiss of radiators and the faint click of a telephone being put back on its hook. Veronica did not blink. She did not reach for the photograph. She simply said very softly, "That's not mine." O'Leary watched her. "Name or the calling card?" Veronica lifted a brow. "And the girl, do you know her?" he said. I forced myself to look again. There was something familiar in the shape of the face, something that suggested ambition, hunger, a certain kind of hope that cities enjoy punishing. "No," Veronica said. O'Leary's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "That's why I'm here and not uniform. Someone's sending messages. You're one of them." Veronica's voice remained pleasant. You've brought me a dead girl and a piece of paper. How thoughtful. You ever heard of the Victory Hotel? O'Leary asked. At that her eyes shifted, just slightly, not fear, calculation. No, she said. Room 814, he added. I felt my stomach tighten. Numbers, I had learned, could be weapons. Veronica's gaze slid briefly to me, and I saw in it a hard, private warning. Don't react. Don't give him anything. Then she looked back to O'Leary. You've got a fondness for melodrama, she said. O'Leary leaned closer, lowering his voice. Listen, Miss Lane, Lakewood, whatever you are this week. I don't care about your past. I care about my city. Somebody's stacking bodies in a pattern. They've started using your name like bait. Veronica's smile sharpened. Perhaps, she said, you should stop biting. Not an option, he replied, because the next body might be someone I can't ignore, and because whoever's doing this is mixed up with people who don't like witnesses. Veronica's tone went airy. And yet here you are, witnessing. O'Leary's eyes flicked once to the far end of the lobby. I followed the glance. A man sat in an armchair pretending to read a newspaper. He was doing it badly, holding it too high, turning pages too slowly. The sort of man who thinks a paper makes him invisible. Veronica noticed him too. Her expression did not change, but the air around her did. Is that one of yours? She asked. O'Leary didn't look. No. Veronica gave a small, delighted exhale. Oh, then we've been invited to something. O'Leary's jaw tightened. You need to come with me. Veronica considered him as if he were offering a ticket to a show she might attend. And if I decline? Then you'll be arrested in the lobby of the Blackstone, and tomorrow half the city will know your face and the other half will know your name, he said. And the man with the newspaper will go make a phone call. Veronica tilted her head. You're threatening me with publicity. How quaint. I'm threatening you with consequences, O'Leary said. I stepped in. Officer. Detective, he corrected. Detective, I said. If someone is framing Miss Lakewood... Veronica's eyes cut to me, quick and sharp. I adjusted without pausing. If someone is framing Miss Lane, then surely the sensible thing is to treat her as a witness, not a suspect. O'Leary studied me. You talk like you believe in sensible things. I was raised on them, I replied. It's a terrible habit. Veronica, who had been silent for a full 3 seconds, a small miracle, spoke. All right, she said. We'll come. O'Leary's shoulders eased a fraction, but his eyes remained hard. Both of you, he said, and keep your heads down. Veronica's smile returned, bright and dangerous. Detective, if I kept my head down, I'd have died in London. She turned to me, her voice dropping to something only I could hear. This, she murmured, is not random. I gathered, I said. Her gaze flicked once more to the man behind the newspaper. Someone has found my old name, she said, and they're using it like a match in a dry room. Who would do that? I asked. Veronica's eyes went distant, not dreamy but precise, as if she were reading a list. Someone who wants a war, she said. Someone who thinks I'm still the sort of woman who can be pushed into a corner. O'Leary opened his coat, showing the badge like an amulet. Move, he said. We walked toward the exit, the lobby lights shining too cheerfully on what was, in truth, the beginning of trouble. Outside, the wind hit us again, cruel and clean. The street smelled of wet stone and coal smoke, and something metallic that might have been the city's own blood. As O'Leary guided us toward an unmarked car, I saw the man with the newspaper stand, and drift after us at a distance, still reading as he walked. Veronica saw him too. She did not turn her head. She did not flinch. But she slipped her hand into the crook of my arm with a casual intimacy that was also a signal. "Stay close." "Arthur," she said lightly, as if we were merely stepping out for air, "do try not to look like a man who expects to be shot." "I don't expect it," I said. Veronica's smile thinned. "Then you're new to Chicago." The unmarked car door opened. The city waited. And somewhere very near, someone was writing a story with corpses as punctuation, and had decided that Veronica Lakewood would make a lovely headline. Chapter 2. A Friendly Badge and an Unfriendly City. The difference between a policeman and a problem is mostly paperwork. Detective Constable Sloane, Vice, according to his own mouth, sat in the front of O'Leary's unmarked car and smoked as if he were paid by the ash. O'Leary drove with the grim patience of a man who had long ago stopped expecting gratitude from the wicked. The heater worked in bursts, like a conscience. Veronica sat beside me in the back, perfectly composed, as though we were on our way to the theatre and not to a building where men file misery into cabinets. "You're frowning again, Arthur," she said mildly. "I'm being cautious." "No," she said. "You're being British." Sloane twisted in his seat just enough to make sure his profile was visible. "You two always talk like that?" he asked. "Only in the presence of rude Americans," Veronica replied. O'Leary didn't bother to hide his irritation. "Keep it cute," he said. "It'll look great in the report." Veronica leaned slightly forward. "Detective, a report is simply a story written by a man with a salary. I've read better." Sloane snorted. "Lady thinks she's clever." Veronica's smile showed the faintest edge. "I don't think it, dear. I budget for it." I watched the city slide past the window, snow turned to sludge, neon bleeding into puddles, men in hats moving briskly as if the cold might arrest them. Chicago at night looked like a bruise that hadn't decided whether to heal or spread. Then O'Leary took a sudden turn, not toward the central station as I expected, but into a narrower street where the buildings crouched together like conspirators. I leaned forward. "Detective." "Quiet," O'Leary said. A car had appeared behind us. Ordinary shape, wrong behavior. Too close, too steady. Headlights that did not wander. Sloane noticed too. His cigarette paused mid-air. "Company?" he asked. O'Leary's jaw tightened. "Not mine." Veronica's gaze moved to the rear window, calm as a woman checking a mirror. "Oh," she said softly. "That's familiar." O'Leary cut left, then right again. Quick, clean turns designed to shake someone who was simply lost. The car stayed. Sloane reached under his coat. I didn't see the gun, but I saw the movement that implies one. Veronica's voice remained conversational. "If you're about to do something heroic, do warn me. I'd like to look appropriately impressed." "Lady," Sloane began. "She's not a lady," O'Leary snapped. And then, as if that were the real insult, he added, "And you're not a cowboy. Put your hand away unless you mean it." We rolled beneath the elevated tracks where the metal screamed overhead. O'Leary killed the lights, pulled in behind a delivery truck, and let the shadow swallow us. The pursuing car drifted past. For a second I saw the driver's profile. Hat low, jaw set, a face built for following orders without asking why. Veronica saw him too. "That one's not Vice," she said. O'Leary exhaled slowly through his nose. "No." Sloane muttered something unpleasant and flicked ash onto the floor. O'Leary started the engine again and drove, this time directly to the station, as if the detour had settled an argument in his mind. I understood the shape of it now. This wasn't merely a raid gone wrong. Someone had decided Veronica's name belonged in the story, and they'd assigned a man to make sure we read the next chapter. The station was all hard angles and tired light. The corridors smelled of wet wool, ink, and the peculiar metallic tang of human disappointment. A desk sergeant looked up, saw O'Leary, and immediately adopted the expression of someone about to be blamed. O'Leary marched us through without ceremony. Veronica walked beside him as though she owned the building and was merely humoring the staff. "Do you treat all your guests this warmly?" she asked. "Only the ones who bring corpses," O'Leary replied. We turned a corner, then I stopped short, because a familiar voice, dry, amused, unmistakably our Chicago, floated from an open doorway. "Tell me, Mike," it said, "is this the part where you arrest the innocent and apologize to the guilty?" A man stepped into view. Detective Michael O'Rourke looked exactly as he always did, calm in the eye, trouble in the posture, suit a shade too rumpled to be vanity and too good to be poverty. He had the expression of someone who had seen enough of the city to stop being shocked, but not enough to stop being angry. And when he saw us, his mouth lifted slightly. Not a grin, not even a smile, but the quiet relief of a man spotting allies in the wrong room. "Captain," he said. "O'Rourke," I replied, and felt something in my chest loosen. Veronica's gaze warmed by a single degree. "Michael," she said, "you look dreadful." "Vera," he returned, using her Chicago name without hesitation. "You look expensive. I assume that's intentional." O'Leary's face hardened. O'Rourke's eyes moved to him, then to Sloane, then back to us. He took in the arrangement, the escort, the posture, the smell of vice on Sloane like cheap cologne. "I leave you two alone for one evening," O'Rourke said, "and vice drags you in like trophies." Sloane bristled. "We got a dead girl and her—" He jerked his chin at Veronica. "Name on the scene." O'Rourke didn't look at Sloane. He looked at O'Leary. "Jack," O'Rourke said quietly, "tell me you didn't bring this to the main floor." O'Leary's voice was defensive. "We're doing our jobs." O'Rourke's tone stayed mild, which somehow made it worse. "Your job," he said, "is not to turn my station into a newspaper." Veronica leaned toward me slightly. "I like him," she murmured. "You liked him before," I murmured back. "Yes," she said. "But I like him again now." O'Rourke held out his hand, not to shake, but to stop the air from moving the wrong way. "All right," he said. "This becomes my problem, because if it's real, it's bigger than vice, and if it's staged—" His eyes flicked to Veronica. "It's meant to make someone very specific look guilty." O'Leary's jaw clenched. "You're taking her side." "I'm taking the side of not being an idiot," O'Rourke said. "Try it sometime. It's refreshing." O'Leary stepped closer. "You don't have jurisdiction over vice cases." O'Rourke's voice remained even. "And you don't have the sense God gave a lamp. But we all have our burdens." Sloane made a low sound. "This is bullshit." O'Rourke's eyes finally met his, flat, unamused. "Sloane," he said, "go find a mirror and practice looking innocent. You'll need it." Sloane went red. O'Leary looked like he might explode. Veronica, of course, looked entertained. O'Rourke motioned us into his office, a smaller room, dimmer, with the comforting clutter of actual work, maps, files, cigarette burns in the wood, and a coffee cup that had clearly given up. The door shut. The station noise dulled. O'Rourke exhaled and rubbed a hand over his face. "Start from the beginning," he said, "but the real beginning. Not the version you'd tell a priest." Veronica sat without being asked. "We were at the Blackstone," she said. "Trying to behave." O'Rourke looked at me. And? Vice approached us, I said. O'Leary. Said there was a raid at the Nightingale. A girl dead. A calling card with Veronica's name. O'Rourke's eyes narrowed slightly. Veronica Lakewood. Veronica's smile was thin. Yes, they've dusted off my London sins and put them on the mantle. O'Rourke said nothing for a beat. Then, they shouldn't know that name. Veronica tilted her head. And yet, they do. O'Rourke reached for a file, opened it, then stopped, as if deciding how much truth to let into the room. Room number, he said. They mention a room. I felt the cold return. 814. O'Rourke's gaze snapped up. Victory Hotel. Yes, I said. O'Rourke swore softly, quietly, professionally, as though profanity were a tool. Veronica watched him. That means something to you. It means it's not random, O'Rourke said. The Victory's a dumping ground for problems people don't want traced, and 814... He paused, then shook his head once. 814 is a message. To me, Veronica said. To both of you, O'Rourke corrected. Because whoever's doing this knows your habits, knows you'll follow the thread instead of cutting it. Veronica's eyes brightened. Michael, you make us sound predictable. You are, O'Rourke said. That's why you're alive. And that's why someone's trying to change the ending. He stood, moved to the window, and looked out at the station yard where snow lay dirty and thin. Here's what's going to happen, he said. Vice wants a quick villain. Someone else wants a public spectacle. And you, he turned back, you two are in the middle because Veronica Lakewood is a name that sells. Veronica's voice went soft, almost cheerful. So what do we do? O'Rourke's eyes held hers. We do what we always do, he said. We go where they don't want us to go. And where is that? I asked. O'Rourke reached into his desk, pulled out a key on a cheap tag, and set it down like a verdict. Room 814, he said. But we go my way. Quiet. No vice. No photographers. No story until we write it ourselves. Veronica's smile returned. Sharp, pleased, dangerous. An appointment, she murmured. O'Rourke looked at her without amusement. Don't enjoy this too much. Veronica rose. I never enjoy danger, she said. I simply refuse to be bored by it. O'Rourke opened the drawer, checked the weight of his revolver like a man checking a watch, then nodded once at me. Hastings, he said, try not to be heroic. I'm not heroic, I said. I'm stubborn. O'Rourke's mouth flicked. That's worse. Veronica slipped her arm lightly through mine. Casual intimacy, practical signal. Outside O'Rourke's office, the station hummed on, indifferent. Inside, the three of us had just agreed to walk directly into the part of Chicago that 8 promises whole. And above the Victory Hotel, room 814 waited like a lie told neatly, ready for someone to believe it. Chapter 3. Room 814 is not a place. Room numbers are supposed to be meaningless. A hotel can change owners, change curtains, change the stains in the carpet, and still call itself respectable. But a number, painted onto a door, stitched onto a key tag, ought to be nothing more than a convenience, except when it becomes a signature. The last time we had seen 814, it had been at the Ambassador Hotel, a room that should have been merely another stop in Chicago's endless parade of private sins. Instead, it had become a small theater of gun oil, staged evidence, and a bullet that had tried to write an ending for Veronica Lakewood. We had survived that ending. Apparently, someone had decided to reprint it. O'Rourke, parked 3 streets away from the building O'Leary insisted on calling the Victory. though it had the look of a place that had never won anything except contempt. The sign over the door flickered like a nervous confession. A man on the corner sold newspapers and watched us with the bored interest of someone who enjoyed other people's disasters. O'Rourke killed the engine and looked at us. "This isn't the ambassador," he said, as if the city might be tempted to confuse the two. "That's the point." Veronica's voice was mild. 814 is the point. O'Rourke nodded once. "Exactly. Whoever's doing this wants you to feel the echo." "And you," Veronica said, "want me to walk into it." "I want you alive," O'Rourke replied. "And I want to know who's bold enough to play with your old name." Veronica's smile was thin. "Bold men are usually stupid men." "That's what worries me," he said. We stepped out into the cold. Chicago's winter wind does not blow, it shoves. It gets inside your collar and argues with your bones. The street smelled of coal smoke, damp wool, and the faint metallic note of the river. Veronica took my arm, casual, graceful, practical. She knew what I knew. In the wrong building, a foot of distance is an invitation to violence. O'Rourke led. No badge out, no authority displayed. In Chicago, a badge was not always protection. Sometimes it was merely a reason to die faster. Inside, the lobby was a tired imitation of dignity, cracked tiles, a desk lamp that made the clerk look jaundiced, and wallpaper peeling like old lies. A radio played somewhere behind a wall, jazz muffled into something mournful. The desk clerk looked up lazily, then stiffened when he registered O'Rourke's face. "Not you again," he muttered. O'Rourke's voice stayed even. "Evening, Eddie." Veronica's brows lifted slightly. "You have friends everywhere, Michael." "I have acquaintances who owe me," O'Rourke said. "There's a difference." Eddie's gaze slid to Veronica and snagged there. Recognition? Not of her face, perhaps, but of the way she held herself. Some women announce trouble without speaking. "What do you want?" Eddie asked too quickly. 814, O'Rourke said. Eddie swallowed. "That room's—" "Don't," O'Rourke cut in, calm as a man choosing where to apply pressure. "Don't lie to me tonight, I'm tired." Eddie's eyes flicked to the corridor, then back. "It's reserved." "By who?" O'Rourke asked. Eddie shook his head. "Cash. No name. Comes and goes. Says it's his office." Veronica laughed softly. "Men do adore pretending their vices are work." O'Rourke didn't smile. "Describe him?" Eddie hesitated, then gave up. Tall. Hard face. Hat low. The kind of guy who doesn't ask. He tells. Veronica's eyes narrowed a fraction. The one who followed us. O'Rourke's mouth tightened. He slid a bill across the counter. Key. Eddie looked at the money like it might explode, then opened a drawer and produced a key tag. Brass worn thin, numbers stamped in black. 814. O'Rourke took it. "Stay at your desk," he said. "If anyone asks, you didn't see us." Eddie nodded too fast. "I didn't see anything." "Good," Veronica said, smiling sweetly. "It suits you." We took the stairs. The elevator existed, but it looked like a machine designed by a man who hated strangers. Up we went, past doors with muffled arguments behind them, past laughter that sounded forced, past a woman's cough that had the rasp of too many winters and too few chances. At the 8th-floor landing, the hallway changed. It grew quieter, colder, as though fewer people lived up here because fewer people were meant to. The corridor was narrow, wallpaper torn, one buzzing bulb overhead. At the far end, the number waited on a door like a smirk. 814. Veronica's fingers tightened briefly on my sleeve, So small I might have imagined it, except she did not imagine things like this. He held up the key. "One more thing," he said. "If this goes wrong, you do not run down the stairs. Fire escape at the end of the hall. We regroup on the street." Veronica's smile returned, sharp. "You've become almost cautious." "I've become almost dead," O'Rourke said. He put the key in the lock. For a second it resisted, as if the door itself were deciding whether to invite us. Then it turned. O'Rourke pushed the door open. The room smelled of gun oil and old paper, and something faintly sweet, like perfume left too long in a drawer. Someone had been here recently. A single lamp burned on the table, making the shadows look deliberate. On the bed lay a small stack of photographs, placed with care, like evidence arranged for a jury that hadn't arrived yet. On top was a newspaper clipping, London, years ago, yellowed and creased, the headline loud with scandal and certainty. Veronica Lakewood, dead or disappeared. Pinned through the clipping was a fresh calling card. Veronica Lakewood. Veronica stared at it, her face unreadable. Then she smiled, slow, dangerous, almost appreciative. "Oh," she said softly, "they've done their homework." O'Rourke stepped closer, scanning the room the way he always did, corners first, then windows, then the places men like to hide lies. "Look," he said. Half under the clipping, like a secret tucked beneath a confession, was a single bullet, polished to a shine. O'Rourke lifted it carefully. Engraved around its base in tiny, precise letters were two words: Room 814. Veronica's voice stayed light. "So," she said, "it isn't nostalgia. It's a threat." "And an instruction," O'Rourke replied. I looked toward the door. The hallway bulb outside went out with a soft pop. Darkness pressed against the threshold like a hand. And somewhere in the building, a telephone began to ring, steady, patient, like someone calling to say the show had started and the audience had better take their seats. O'Rourke's eyes lifted from the bullet. "We're not alone," he said. Veronica's smile widened a fraction. "Good," she murmured. "Neither are they." Chapter 4. The Men Who Clean Up for a Living. The telephone rang as if it had manners. That is the first trick of a well-planned threat. It arrives politely. It gives you the illusion of choice. It says answer me instead of obey me, and by the time you notice the difference, you have already moved your hand. The ringing came from the bedside table, an old black instrument with a coiled cord like a snake at rest. It did not belong in a room like this. The Victory's rooms did not offer telephones. They offered blankets that smelled of strangers and locks that worked when they felt like it. O'Rourke didn't look at the phone. He looked at the door, then at the window, then at the wardrobe. Then he moved, quiet, fast, and pulled the door shut until it clicked. "Stay away from the windows," he said. Veronica drifted 3 steps to the side, as graceful as a woman changing partners in a dance. "Michael," she said, "if someone meant to shoot me through glass, they'd have done it in the lobby. This is theater." "I don't like theater," O'Rourke replied. "It has an audience." The phone kept ringing. I watched it with the kind of stubborn suspicion one reserves for objects that suddenly demand attention. "Perhaps it's room service," I said. "They've heard you're here and want to poison the coffee." Veronica glanced at me. "Arthur, you're trying to be witty when you're frightened." "I'm not frightened," I said. "You're English," she corrected. O'Rourke reached for the receiver, but instead of lifting it to his ear, he held it in front of him, listening to the line as if it might hiss. Then he spoke into it, flat and careful. "Yeah." A voice came through, muffled, distorted, as though the speaker were smiling into cloth. "Detective," it said, "you brought her." O'Rourke's eyes went still. "Who is this?" The voice chuckled softly. "You know who I am not. I'm not Vice. I'm not the papers. I'm not your friends downtown." Veronica leaned slightly forward, eyes bright. "That leaves such a wide range of disappointments?" The voice paused, just enough to register that she was listening. "Miss Lakewood," it said, savoring the name like an old drink. "Chicago wears you well." Veronica's smile did not reach her eyes. "Chicago wears everyone badly. Some of us are simply harder to stain." O'Rourke cut in. "What do you want?" The voice became almost gentle. "I want you to understand the story. I want you to stop interfering." O'Rourke's jaw clenched. "A girl is dead." "Yes," the voice said. "Elsie. Pretty thing. Thought she could be something. Chicago teaches ambition the same lesson every time." Veronica's voice cooled. "You killed her." "I didn't," the voice replied, still calm. "She died because she was careless with names. That happens." O'Rourke's grip tightened on the receiver. "You staged the card." "I staged the message," the voice corrected. "The card is just punctuation." Veronica's gaze flicked to the bullet on the bed. "And the bullet?" A quiet laugh. "A souvenir. I'm sentimental." O'Rourke's eyes narrowed. "You're calling from where?" The voice laughed again, this time openly. "Still a detective. Still pretending questions matter. You're in a room, Mike, that isn't special. The number is special. That's the joke." O'Rourke's face hardened at the familiarity of his name. "Who are you?" he demanded. The voice softened. "A man who cleans up." The line went dead. O'Rourke held the receiver to his ear for a beat, then set it down slowly, as though it might bite. Veronica exhaled once, controlled. "Well," she said. "That was rude." O'Rourke didn't answer. He crossed to the phone, examined it, and followed the cord to the wall. It disappeared into a small hole in the plaster, freshly cut. "That wasn't hotel wiring," he said. "That was installed." I stared. "In this place?" O'Rourke's mouth tightened. "In any place, that's the point. Someone wanted a room where they control the line." Veronica's eyes moved around the room, measuring it the way she measures men. "So this is a stage," she said. "And we've been positioned." O'Rourke nodded. "Yeah." "Then," Veronica murmured, "where's the trapdoor?" O'Rourke was already answering. He crouched and checked under the bed. Nothing. He opened the wardrobe, a few wire hangers, dust, and the faint smell of cheap cologne. He moved to the bathroom, checked behind the shower curtain, checked the window latch, checked the little cabinet above the sink. Then he stopped. The mirror above the sink was new, too new. It didn't match the rest of the room's tired misery. O'Rourke reached out and tapped it. The sound was wrong, hollow. He slid his fingers behind the frame and pulled. The mirror swung outward like a door. Behind it was a narrow recess in the wall, lined with dark felt, like a jewel box. Inside lay a folder. O'Rourke lifted it out, brought it to the table, and opened it under the lamp. Photographs. Not of Elsie. Of us. A shot of Veronica and me in the lobby of the Blackstone. A shot of us stepping into O'Rourke's car. A shot of O'Rourke leaving the station entrance, coat collar turned up. Then, more disturbing, a shot of Veronica in a Chicago club, months ago, laughing at a table, the picture taken from across the room like a hunter's memory. Another shot of her exiting a jeweler's shop on State Street. Another of her in profile, cigarette between her fingers, eyes fixed on something I could not see. Veronica's face remained calm, but the air around her tightened. O'Rourke flipped the next page. A typed list. Vera Lane/Veronica Lakewood, Captain Arthur Hastings, Detective Michael O'Rourke, Detective Sergeant Jack O'Leary, Nightingale Raid, Asset Elsie Morrow, Disposal next, Public cleanup. My stomach turned. O'Rourke went very still. Veronica read the words like a woman reading a menu. Asset, she said softly. So, Elsie was someone's, what? Informant? O'Rourke's jaw worked. Or bait. And public cleanup? I asked. Veronica's eyes stayed on the paper. That, she said, sounds like a massacre dressed as morality. O'Rourke snapped the folder shut. We leave, he said. Veronica didn't argue. Rare, ominous. Yes, she agreed, before they decide to clean up in person. O'Rourke moved to the door, hand on the knob. He paused, listening. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. He opened the door a fraction, looked out. Then he cursed. I stepped up behind him. At the far end of the corridor, the fire escape door stood open, swinging slightly in the draught. Someone's been here, I said. O'Rourke nodded once. They wanted that mirror opened. Veronica's smile returned, small and sharp. Of course they did. Information is only valuable once you know it exists. O'Rourke closed the door gently, like a man shutting a coffin. We don't go out the hall, he said. We go out the window. Bathroom. I stared. Are you insane? O'Rourke looked at me, grinned. I am practical. Veronica touched my arm. Arthur, she murmured, if you fall, do try to fall in an elegant direction. I'm not falling, I muttered. O'Rourke opened the bathroom window. The air that came in was brutal, full of snow and city stink. Outside, a narrow ledge ran along the building, and beyond it the iron ribs of the fire escape. O'Rourke climbed first, moving like a man who had done worse things for less reason. Veronica followed, without hesitation, skirt gathered with practical grace. I went last, regretting every decision that had brought me to America. We reached the fire escape, just as the sound of footsteps hurried up the stairwell. Heavy, purposeful, not drunk, not lost. O'Rourke grabbed the ladder and started down. Veronica moved after him. I looked back once through the window. The room's door swung inward. A man stepped into 814. He wore a dark coat and a hat low over his face. He moved with calm certainty, like a man arriving to inspect his own work. He glanced at the bed, saw the opened folder, and, though I could not see his eyes, I felt the shape of his satisfaction. Then he turned and looked directly at the bathroom window. At me. For one terrible second we stared at each other through the frame, and then he lifted his hand, just like the man at the Blackstone, and gave that same small, courteous wave, as if to say, "Good. You're following the plot." I climbed onto the fire escape. Below us, the city waited, hungry and patient. And somewhere in it, men who clean up were preparing to wash Chicago with blood and call it progress. Chapter 5. The Bright Lights of a Dirty Promise. The fire escape rattled under our weight like a ladder in a bad dream. O'Rourke went first, boots finding purchase on rusted iron, with the confidence of a man who had spent his life climbing out of other people's mistakes. Veronica followed without the slightest tremor, as if descending a metal skeleton 8 floors above the street were merely another sort of staircase for the ambitious. I came last, praying in the old-fashioned way, silently, stubbornly, with no expectation of mercy. Halfway down, a window above us slammed open. A shape leaned out, dark coat, hat low, no gun, no shouting, just that calm certainty again, like a man watching theatre from a private box. He called down, not loudly, just enough to carry. "Captain!" he said. My skin tightened. The voice was the same as the telephone, but less distorted now, warm, civil, deadly. You're a long way from Whitehall, he added, as if England were simply another habit you should have broken by now. O'Rourke froze for half a second, then kept moving. Don't talk to him, he said under his breath. Don't give him air. Veronica looked up, her face angled so the man could see it. You've been practicing your entrances, she called, sweet as sugar over poison. Have you considered taking a bow as well? The man chuckled. Miss Lakewood. She laughed. No, not tonight. Tonight I'm Vera. Names are flexible, he said. Truth is not. Veronica's smile sharpened. How noble. He leaned a little farther out. Your friend Elsie wasn't noble, he said conversationally. She wanted out. She thought she'd sell the right name to the right man and buy herself a future. O'Rourke's jaw tightened so hard I heard his teeth click. Veronica's voice cooled. You used her. I used the opportunity, the man replied. She made choices. Choices have prices. Veronica's eyes narrowed. So does arrogance. He chuckled again, amused by the idea that arrogance could ever be punished in a city built on it. Go on, he said. Run. You'll still end up where I want you. This city has only so many roads, and I've bought most of the signs. Then the window slammed shut. No gunshot, no chase. Just the lingering certainty that we were being guided, not hunted. We reached the ground level and stepped into an alley that smelled of coal bins, stale beer, and the sour tang of fear that has nowhere to go. Snow fell in soft, indifferent flakes. A cat watched us from atop a dumpster and did not bother to move. O'Rourke led us out onto the street and into motion immediately. Not the car, he said. They'll have eyes on it. We walk. Veronica adjusted her coat collar as if the cold were a minor inconvenience. I do love being chased, she said. It makes the city feel invested. O'Rourke shot her a look. This isn't a flirtation. Veronica's smile was thin. Everything is a flirtation. It's just a question of whether you're being wooed or bought. O'Rourke kept us moving. Side streets, corners, doorways, pauses just long enough to listen, then on again. I caught a glimpse of two men at the far end of a block, hats low, shoulders broad, moving with that steady, purposeful gait that means they're not searching, they're closing. O'Rourke saw them too. He swore. We're being boxed. Veronica's voice stayed calm. Then we choose a wall and break it. O'Rourke turned sharply into a lit street full of theaters and restaurants, the noise louder, the crowd thicker. People in furs and coats, laughter forced against the cold, taxis sliding like beetles on wet stone. Crowd cover, I said. Crowd witnesses, O'Rourke replied. They won't shoot here. Veronica looked pleased. So they'll wait until we do. We passed a cinema with a bright marquee advertising a glamorous picture full of smiling faces. The irony sat on my tongue like bile. At the corner, O'Rourke steered us into a diner. Warmth, grease, coffee, and the comforting stink of ordinary life. Inside, the counter was full of men in work coats, hats on knees. A waitress with hair the color of cheap honey slid plates of eggs down the line with the speed of someone who had learned not to be kind. O'Rourke guided us into a back booth. Stay here, he said. I make a call. Veronica raised a brow. To whom? Your priest? Your mother? O'Rourke ignored her and went to the payphone by the door. I watched him dial, shoulders tense. Veronica sat opposite me, eyes scanning the room with that cool, predatory awareness that had kept her alive through London and Chicago both. Across the diner, a man in a fedora entered, shook snow from his coat. and paused just a fraction too long as his eyes found our booth. Veronica saw him at once. Her hand went under the table, not for a weapon, but for my wrist. "Arthur," she murmured. "Don't look now." I didn't look. My body stiffened anyway. O'Rourke was still at the phone, voice low, urgent. The man took a seat at the counter, ordered coffee, and stared into the mirror behind the bottles, watching us through reflections. Veronica's voice stayed calm, almost bored. "He's not Vice." "None of them are," I said quietly. Veronica smiled faintly. "Good. Vice is lazy. This is professional." O'Rourke returned, face tight. "We can't go to my place," he said. "They'll already be there. We can't go back to the station. Too many years. We need somewhere neutral." "A church?" I offered. O'Rourke snorted. "Churches aren't neutral in this town." Veronica's eyes lifted slightly. "We need a place with light," she said. "And people. The kind of people who don't like bullets in their wallpaper." O'Rourke frowned. "Where?" Veronica leaned in, voice low and crisp. "The fundraiser," she said. O'Rourke's eyes narrowed. "What fundraiser?" Veronica's smile turned sharp. "Don't tell me you haven't heard. Leland Crowe is hosting a Clean City Gala at the Palmer House tonight. Photographers, politicians, captains of industry, all smiling while they sell each other knives." O'Rourke's face went darker. "That's exactly where they want us." Veronica shrugged slightly. "Of course it is. That's why it's useful." "You're insane," O'Rourke muttered. Veronica's eyes glittered. "Michael, men who clean up need audiences. They need headlines. They need respectable witnesses." I felt it then, the shape of the plan. The list in the folder. Next. Public cleanup. A gala, a morality show, a place where the city could applaud itself. And in the middle of it, a convenient villain, Veronica Lakewood. O'Rourke leaned closer, voice hard. "If we walk into that ballroom, we're walking into a trap with a chandelier." Veronica's smile didn't move. "Yes. And you still want to go?" Veronica's gaze held his. "I want to see who applauds." O'Rourke stared at her for a long beat, then exhaled through his nose. "All right," he said. "We go. But we go smart." Veronica's eyes warmed slightly. "You always did have potential." O'Rourke's mouth tightened. "You two change. You're not Veronica Lakewood and Captain Hastings tonight." Veronica blinked. "I'm not." "You're donors," O'Rourke said. "Friends of a friend. People who belong. People who can walk in and out without being dragged." Veronica's smile widened, genuinely amused. "Michael, you're asking me to pretend to be respectable." "I'm asking you to stay alive," O'Rourke replied. Veronica's voice softened. "I can do both. It's my greatest talent." O'Rourke slid out of the booth first. "Finish your coffee," he said to me. "You're going to need steady hands." I looked at the cup. My hands were already steady. It was my stomach that was staging a rebellion. As we stood to leave, the man at the counter lifted his coffee and took a slow sip, still watching our reflection. Veronica paused beside him, turned her head just enough to speak without looking. "Tell your employer," she said pleasantly, "that if he wants to see me, he should buy a ticket like everyone else." The man didn't react, but the muscle in his jaw jumped once. We stepped out into the snow again. Chicago's bright lights waited ahead, the Palmer House glowing like a jewel in the dark, full of music and money, and the kind of men who called murder cleanup. And as we walked toward that warmth, I understood something with grim clarity. This wasn't merely a frame, it was a performance. And in the final act, whatever it was, someone intended to make Room 814 a story the whole city would remember. Chapter 6. The clean city lies, and the dirty city tells the truth. The Palmer House glowed like a confession lit from within. Outside, Chicago was winter and soot and slush, men hunched in collars, women moving fast, the lake wind bullying everything into obedience. But inside the hotel's grand ballroom, the city became what it liked to pretend it was. Chandeliers, satin, polite laughter, and 1,000 small bargains disguised as handshakes. A band played something cheerful enough to be offensive. Veronica paused at the entrance, taking it in with the quiet absorption of a woman who has lived in rooms like this and survived the men who funded them. Her hair caught the light. Her expression did not. "You've been in better," O'Rourke murmured beside us. Veronica's smile was faint. "I've been in worse." I offered her my arm. She took it, lightly, but she took it. The gesture was public, conventional, and yet it carried a private meaning I felt in my bones. We are together in this, whether we admit it or not. O'Rourke leaned in, low voice. "Remember, you're donors, not suspects. Don't look hunted." Veronica's eyes flicked to him. "Michael, I never look hunted. I look unreachable." "And you," he said to me, "stop scanning every corner like a soldier." "I am a soldier," I replied. "Tonight you're a husband," O'Rourke said flatly. Veronica's mouth curved. "Oh." I stiffened. "That's not—" "It's perfect," Veronica said, and her fingers tightened once at my elbow, a small pressure that silenced my protest. Her voice dropped for me alone. "Arthur, if you correct him, you'll make it interesting." "I thought we wanted it uninteresting." "We want us uninteresting," she murmured. "We want them to forget we're watching." So we walked in as a couple. And for a moment, just a moment, it almost felt like one. The room was full of men with clean cuffs and dirty pockets, politicians in tuxedos, preachers with moral smiles, businessmen whose eyes never stopped calculating. Press photographers hovered near the dais like flies near fruit. A banner above the stage proclaimed, "The Clean City Initiative, a safer Chicago for our families." Veronica read it aloud under her breath. "Families," she said. How charmingly they weaponize the word. O'Rourke peeled away toward the edge of the room, his badge invisible, his presence watchful. He had friends here, people who owed him, people who feared him, and people who would betray him if it bought them a promotion. He would move among them like a man walking through shallow water, pretending it wasn't deep enough to drown. Veronica and I moved toward the bar. A waiter offered champagne. Veronica took one because refusing in rooms like this is a confession. I did not drink. My mind was on the folder in 814, the engraved bullet, and the words, "Elsie Morrow, disposal." Next, public cleanup. Public, clean, a massacre in a white glove. Veronica leaned slightly toward me. "Breathe," she murmured. "I am breathing." "You're breathing like you're about to charge a trench." I glanced at her. "And you?" Veronica's gaze remained on the room. "I'm breathing like I'm about to steal something." That's not reassuring. Her smile softened, just a shade. "Arthur, you're always reassured by the wrong things." Then her fingers brushed mine. Barely. Under the cover of her clutch, hidden by etiquette, she slipped her hand into mine and squeezed once. Not theatrical, not strategic. Private. A reminder that after all the cleverness and the masks and the histories, she was here and I was here, and the city could not have either of us for free. I swallowed. "You said Elsie made a mistake with names." Veronica's eyes narrowed. Yes, she wrote mine. She didn't know you, I said. So, how did she get your card? Veronica's mouth tightened. Because someone gave it to her. And why would she carry it? Veronica's gaze flicked, sharp, to the dais where a tall man in a white tie was greeting donors with a practiced paternal warmth. Because someone promised her protection, she said. Or money. Or an exit. Who is that? I asked. Veronica watched him the way one watches a gun being loaded. That, she said, is Leland Crowe. Crowe looked like respectability sculpted into a man, silver at the temples, handsome without warmth, smile polished to a shine. He moved through the room as though it were his drawing room, and the city outside merely his staff. As if he had felt our gaze, he turned. His eyes landed on Veronica, his smile held. Then, very deliberately, he lifted a glass toward us in the smallest possible salute. Veronica's expression did not change, but the hand in mine tightened. He knows, I said. Veronica's voice was calm. He knows my name. He knows what it buys. O'Rourke appeared behind us, moving like a shadow with paperwork. Crowe's speech is in 10 minutes, he said. I got something. He slid a folded note into my palm without looking like he'd done it. On the note was a room number and a name. Service Corridor C, Mr. Langley. Veronica's brows lifted. Langley? O'Rourke nodded once. Crowe's fixer, former cop, runs cleanup for him, raids, intimidation, evidence that grows legs when it needs to. My stomach went cold. So the voice on the phone? Could be him, O'Rourke said, or someone under him. But here's the explanation we've been missing. Vice didn't decide to raid the Nightingale because they suddenly found God. Crowe wanted the Nightingale broken. Why? Veronica asked. O'Rourke's voice dropped. Because the Nightingale has something, someone, a ledger, a list, payoffs, names, and Crowe's building an image right now, clean city, family values, while keeping his hands in the filth. If the Nightingale talks, the whole sermon collapses. Veronica's eyes sharpened. So, Elsie? Elsie was a runner, O'Rourke said. She moved between the club and the men paying for it. She was seen leaving with a folder the night of the raid. I stared. A folder like the one in 814. O'Rourke nodded. She got scared, tried to sell her way out, probably to Vice, probably to a reporter, probably to Crowe's people. Either way, she became a problem. Veronica's voice went flat. So they killed her. O'Rourke's gaze held hers. And they staged your name, so the problem points away from them. Veronica's smile was thin. They chose the wrong woman. O'Rourke's mouth tightened. They chose the right headline. He leaned closer. Langley's in Service Corridor C. If we get him alone, we can force answers. Veronica glanced at me. Arthur? I knew what she was asking. Are you with me? Are you still here? I squeezed her hand once. Yes. Her eyes softened for a fraction of a second. It was nothing, and yet it was everything we could afford in a room full of predators. We moved. O'Rourke led us through a side door into a carpeted corridor where the music dulled and the air changed. Less perfume, more steam and dish soap. The back of a luxury hotel is always the truth. Labor, heat, and men who do not smile because they do not need to. We reached a service corridor marked C. A man stood at the far end, talking to a waiter who looked terrified. He was tall, hard-faced, hat low even indoors, because men like him wear their shadows wherever they go. He held himself with the relaxed certainty of someone who had never been punished for violence. Veronica's eyes narrowed. That's our follower. O'Rourke nodded. Langley. Langley turned, saw us, and smiled like a man seeing the final piece arrive. "Miss Lakewood," he said. His voice was warm, cultivated, and utterly false. "How kind of you to attend the gala. Mr. Crow sends his regards." Veronica's smile came out sharp. "Tell Mr. Crow his taste in messengers is dated." Langley's eyes flicked to me. "And the captain. Romantic of you to keep her company." I stepped forward. "You killed Elsie Morrow." Langley laughed softly. "Captain, in this city girls die every night. If you want to mourn, start a church." O'Rourke's voice went cold. "Where's the folder she stole?" Langley's smile didn't change. "What folder?" O'Rourke took a step closer. "The one you recovered. The one you tried to use to frame Vera." Langley's eyes sharpened at Vera. For the first time his smile thinned. "Ah," he said. "So she has a pet name. How sweet." Veronica's voice cooled. "You're going to stop talking about me as if I'm not here." Langley's gaze slid to her. "You're always here," he said. "That's your problem." O'Rourke's hand moved under his coat, not drawing, warning. Langley noticed. He raised his palm slightly. "Careful, detective. This corridor has ears, and this hotel has donors. If you make a scene, the scene will be you." Veronica tilted her head. "Public cleanup," she murmured. "That was your phrase, wasn't it?" Langley's smile returned. "A clean city takes work." "And blood," Veronica said. Langley shrugged. "Blood washes out." I felt Veronica's hand brush my sleeve. A signal. Now. I stepped closer, voice low. "Why 814? Langley's eyes glinted. "Because it scared you." Veronica's gaze stayed steady. "No," she corrected. "Because you wanted me to remember." Langley's smile widened. "London, yes, the little tragedy, the rich lover, the jewelry, the disappearing act." He said it all lightly, as if reading gossip from a paper. "You thought you escaped your story, but stories don't end when the audience is still paying." Veronica's eyes went very cold. "Crow dug up my London past." Langley inclined his head. "Crow buys information. London sells it. You're not special." Veronica's smile sharpened. "Then why use my name?" Langley leaned in slightly, voice soft. "Because a dead girl with your card under her hand gives the city what it craves. A glamorous villain. A foreign scandal. A woman who doesn't fit. The public gets their monster, Crow gets his clean city applause, and the men who really run the filth keep running it." Veronica's fingers slid into mine again, hidden by the angle of our bodies. This time the squeeze was not just affection. It was control. It steadied me. O'Rourke's voice was sharp. "Where is the folder?" Langley's gaze flicked past us, toward the ballroom. "Right now," he said. "Probably in Mr. Crow's hands, or in his safe, or in his fireplace. Depends on the speech." O'Rourke went still. "The speech." Langley smiled. "He's about to announce a major breakthrough. A successful raid. A promise to clean up the city. And he'll name the culprit." Veronica's eyes narrowed. "Me." Langley's smile turned satisfied. "You." My stomach tightened. "That's ridiculous. There's no evidence." Langley's eyes gleamed. "Evidence is just paper with authority behind it. Vice has statements. Photographers have pictures. A dead girl has your card, and the public has an appetite." O'Rourke's voice dropped to a growl. "You're going to let Crow pin a murder on her?" Langley shrugged again. "It's not personal. It's efficient." Veronica's voice softened, dangerously so. "And what do you get?" Langley's smile widened a fraction. A city that runs smoothly, and a man who pays well. Veronica looked at him for a long beat. Then she leaned toward him, close enough that her perfume reached him first. "Tell Mr. Crow," she said quietly, "that if he wants to use my name in public, he should be prepared for what I do in private." Langley chuckled. "Threats don't suit you." Veronica's eyes held his. Neither does overconfidence. O'Rourke made a decision. I saw it in the set of his shoulders. "We're done," he said. "We go back in. We stop the speech." Langley laughed, genuinely amused now. "Stop it? Detective, you can't stop a man with donors. You can only die loudly." At that, Veronica's hand tightened in mine, and she turned her head slightly toward me, so slightly no one else would notice. "Arthur," she murmured, "I'm sorry." "For what?" I whispered. Her eyes softened, just for me, for dragging you into my old life. I felt the heat rise in my chest, anger, tenderness, fear. "You didn't drag me," I said. "I chose." Her gaze held mine. "You keep choosing," she said softly, as if the fact both terrified and moved her. "Even when you shouldn't." I could not say what I wanted to say in that corridor. Not with Langley smiling, not with O'Rourke listening, not with Chicago pressing its ear to the walls. So I did the only thing I could afford. I squeezed her hand, and she squeezed back. It was not a kiss. It was not a confession. It was a promise made in the only language we trusted. Action. O'Rourke stepped toward the ballroom door. Langley called after us, voice pleasant. "Enjoy the speech." And behind us, quietly, politely, Langley reached into his coat. O'Rourke saw it at the last instant. "Down!" he shouted. A gunshot cracked in the corridor, sharp, bright, obscene in a place meant for linen and trays. Veronica jerked against me, and I dragged her hard to the side, as plaster exploded from the wall where our heads had been a moment before. We hit the floor behind a service cart. O'Rourke drew his weapon, eyes blazing. Langley had already retreated, moving fast, not panicked, a professional. He vanished through a side door as alarms began to shout somewhere in the hotel. Late, useless. In the ballroom beyond, the band kept playing for a few seconds, oblivious. Then the music faltered, then stopped. And above the sudden silence, we heard Leland Crow's voice, amplified, smooth, confident, beginning his speech to the city's finest. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we take a decisive step toward a cleaner Chicago." O'Rourke's face went cold. Veronica's eyes glittered. I felt her hand find mine again, tight and certain. "No more vagueness," she murmured. "Now we make it plain." And we rose, dust on our coats, breath hard in our lungs, ready to walk into the ballroom and ruin a man's sermon in front of his choir. Chapter 7. A Cleaner Lie. We stepped through the ballroom doors as the band died mid-note, and the room turned its face toward the stage. Crow's voice rolled on, unbothered by the disturbance behind the curtains of his gala. "A decisive step toward a cleaner Chicago." He paused, tasting it, and lifted his hands, generous and paternal. "And a safer Chicago for our families." A few people applauded on reflex. In rooms like this, applause is often just obedience with gloves on. O'Rourke moved first, threading between tables with the calm pace of a man refusing to run in front of witnesses. Veronica and I followed a step behind, close enough to be together, far enough to look like we belonged. Crow's eyes found us. His smile did not change, but the muscle beside it did. He adjusted seamlessly. "Tonight," he said into the microphone, "we also celebrate cooperation. Brave men in vice. Brave men in City Hall. Brave men who... I watched the crowd. Not the obvious faces, the hungry photographers, the bored politicians, but the men who didn't clap. The men who looked at exits the way soldiers look at hedgerows. 2, near the right wall, stiff collars, 2 still. 1 by the service door pretending to be staff. 3 problems at least, and that was before you counted Langley. O'Rourke reached the aisle and spoke, not loudly, but with a voice that carried because it expected to be obeyed. Leland Crowe. Crowe's expression warmed, as if greeting a friend. "Detective," he replied smoothly. "I do wish you'd picked a better night for your enthusiasm." O'Rourke didn't smile. "I'm here about Elsie Morrow." The name struck the room and made it lean forward. A few heads turned. A few donors stopped chewing. Crowe's eyes remained kind. "A tragic girl," he said. "A victim of the very filth we're trying to remove." Veronica, just behind O'Rourke, spoke with the airy precision of a woman slicing fruit. "Don't flatter yourself, Mr. Crowe. Filth has never needed your permission." A nervous ripple of laughter ran through the nearest tables. Crowe's smile tightened by a hair. He glanced down, as if checking a name card. "And you are?" Veronica's smile flashed. "Someone you paid to research." Crowe looked back to the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, tone gently apologetic, "you'll forgive a minor disruption. Chicago is full of people who mistake a gala for a courtroom." He turned slightly, dismissing us with grace, and continued. "And thanks to the diligence of our partners in Vice, we have made an arrest in connection with the Nightingale." O'Rourke cut in. "No, you haven't." Crowe stopped again. This pause was colder. "Detective," he said, still smiling, "are you accusing our city departments of lying?" "Yes," O'Rourke replied, "and I'm accusing you of arranging it." Crowe gave a soft laugh into the microphone, the sound of money pretending to be amused. "What a dramatic claim. And what evidence do you bring us? Rumors? The imagination? Wounded pride?" O'Rourke reached into his coat. He did not draw a weapon. He drew paper. He held up the typed sheet from room 814. "A list," he said. "Names, targets, and the phrase you use when you want murder to sound like hygiene." He read it clearly. "Elsie Morrow, disposal. Next, public cleanup." The room made that peculiar sound rich people make when they have been shown something ugly. A stifled intake, as if ugliness were impolite. Crowe's smile held. "A typed sheet," he said gently into the microphone. "Anyone can type." "True," Veronica said. "But not everyone chooses the same vocabulary." I kept my gaze on the edges. One of the staff men had shifted, hand near his jacket, as if remembering he was armed and deciding whether the audience mattered. Another had stepped closer to the service doors. Crowe leaned toward the microphone, voice suddenly harder beneath the warmth. "Miss Lane," Veronica said, then let the name sit a beat like a coin on a table. "Lakewood, if you prefer the expensive version." The change was visible in Crowe. Recognition, calculation, and the smallest flare of irritation. He recovered instantly. "Ladies and gentlemen," Crowe said, smiling, "this is precisely the sort of distraction criminals use when their world is threatened. They throw mud from the alley and hope it stains a clean suit." O'Rourke's reply was flat. "You don't have clean suits. You have good laundry." Crowe's eyes narrowed. "You're on thin ice, Detective." O'Rourke nodded. "I know. That's why I brought witnesses." He didn't mean the crowd. I knew that immediately, because his eyes flicked to the entrance in a way that said now. Movement at the back of the ballroom. O'Leary appeared. He stood by the doorway, shoulders squared, the face of a man who had decided which sins he was tired of committing. In his hands was a thick folder, weighty, real, the sort of thing that made men like Crow reach for invisible knives. Crow saw it. For the first time his composure slipped, not into panic, but into a brief, revealing disgust, as if the room itself had betrayed him. O'Leary's voice carried. "That arrest you're about to announce?" he said. "It's a frame." Crow's mouth stayed smiling. "O'Leary," he said, as though this were a private matter. "You're interrupting." O'Leary took 2 steps forward and held the folder up. "This is the Nightingale ledger," he said. "Names, payoffs, dates, cash drops. It doesn't point to Vera Lane." He looked straight at Crow. "It points to you." A whisper ran through the crowd like a match catching dry paper. The photographers began to shoot in earnest. Flashbulbs popped like small explosions. Crow leaned into the microphone, voice sharpened. "You're displaying stolen property, Sergeant. Put it down." O'Leary didn't move. "You don't get to tell me what to do anymore." Crow's gaze flicked toward the service doors, quick, controlled. I saw it. O'Rourke saw it. Veronica saw it. It was the look of a man calling his cleaners. Then Langley stepped out from behind the stage drapes, hat low, calm face, gun in hand. Not waved, not brandished, aimed with discipline. He pointed it at O'Leary. The room froze. Veronica didn't move. She didn't need to. Her stillness was a kind of contempt. My body, on the other hand, did what it has always done in the presence of gunfire. It measured distances, stage to aisle, a table leg thick enough to stop a bullet, probably not. The nearest exit, too far. I caught O'Rourke's eye for half a second. He knew what I was thinking. He gave a microscopic shake of his head. "Don't." Langley spoke mildly, as if addressing staff. "Give me the ledger, Jack," he said. "Don't make it messy." O'Leary's jaw flexed. "You're going to shoot me on a stage in front of your donors?" Langley's mouth twitched. "No, I'm going to shoot you in the confusion. That's what confusion is for." Crow leaned into the microphone, voice soothing. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. This is an unfortunate misunderstanding." Veronica cut him off, bright and perfectly pitched for the press. "Mr. Crow," she said, "your misunderstanding has a gun." The room's attention swung toward Crow. Cameras turned. Crow's jaw tightened. He tried to reclaim the narrative. "Miss Lakewood," he said sharply, "you are a known fraud. A thief. A convenient villain," Veronica finished. "Yes. I've read the clippings, too. They're poorly written." Then she turned her gaze outward to the crowd and spoke as if she were giving them permission to see. "Elsie Morrow was murdered," she said. "Her body was labeled with my name to give you a monster you could enjoy blaming, and now you're watching the men who claim to clean the city pull guns to protect their dirt." I saw Langley's eyes flick to Crow. It wasn't fear. It was appraisal. How much is he going to sacrifice? Crow's smile returned, thin as paper. "Detective," he said into the microphone, "stop performing." O'Rourke moved, not toward Langley, but toward the microphone stand. He didn't grab it. He simply spoke into it, voice clean and cold. "Langley," he said, amplified, "you shot at me in Service Corridor C. That's attempted murder. You pull that trigger here in front of the press and you're done. Not moved, not protected. Done." Langley's face didn't change, but his eyes narrowed. The calculation shifted. The audience mattered now. Veronica spoke softly, not to Crow, but to Langley, the way one speaks to a man on the edge of a bad decision. "Michael's right," she said. "If you shoot him, You won't be cleaned up. You'll be thrown away." Langley hesitated. In that half-second, I did the only useful thing I could do without turning into a melodrama. I stepped sideways, just one pace, blocking the cleanest line between Langley's gun and Veronica's body. Not as a shield, nothing so heroic and stupid, but as an interruption, a complication. Men like Langley prefer simple shots. O'Leary moved, not cinematic, not brave, practical. He flung the ledger, hard, straight at Langley's gun hand. Paper and weight struck wrist and metal. The gun jerked. A shot cracked into the ceiling. The chandelier trembled. The spell broke. People screamed. Chairs scraped. Bodies surged toward exits. O'Rourke tackled Langley from the side, driving him into the drapes. They vanished into fabric and struggle. Crow stepped back from the podium, turning toward the service door, trying to disappear into the building's veins. I saw it at the same time Veronica did, and Veronica did the simplest, most viciously clever thing imaginable. She raised her voice, not to shout, but to aim it. "He's leaving," she announced clearly to the photographers. "Mr. Crow is leaving." Flashbulbs detonated. Reporters surged. Donors, without meaning to, stepped into Crow's path, because no one wants to be the man who lets the headline walk away. Crow stopped. Not trapped by law, trapped by optics. On the stage, O'Rourke reappeared with Langley's arm wrenched behind him. Langley swore through his teeth, trying to keep his dignity while his dignity was being folded. O'Leary, breathing hard, retrieved the gun and kicked it under the podium. Then he stood there with the ledger clutched to his chest, like a man holding the one thing in the room that was finally telling the truth. O'Rourke produced cuffs. "Langley," he said, "you're under arrest." Langley smiled through blood. "For what? The city belongs to—" O'Rourke snapped the cuffs tight. "For thinking it belongs to you." He turned his head toward Crow, who stood rigid beneath the lights, cameras flashing. "And you," O'Rourke said, voice carrying without the microphone now because everyone was listening, "are coming too." Crow's expression smoothed again, but his eyes were murder. "You can't do this," he said quietly. O'Rourke nodded once. "I can. The question is whether I live long enough to finish it." O'Leary stepped beside him, ledger held up so the cameras could see it. "We finish it," O'Leary said. And I understood then what Crow had built. Not a clean city, but a network of fear. Fear, when exposed, turns quickly into anger. The room was no longer his choir. It was his jury. They took them out through the front, because the back was for men who still had friends. Outside, the cold snapped at faces and the press swarmed. Crow kept his chin high. Langley kept his smile. Both of them looked like men betting on tomorrow. O'Rourke didn't linger. He shoved Langley into a car and spoke to the driver in a tone that meant no detours. Then he turned to O'Leary. "You just made enemies," O'Rourke said. O'Leary's mouth twisted. "I had them already. I just stopped pretending they were friends." O'Rourke turned to leave, then paused and looked back at us. "Next time," he said to me, "pick a hobby that doesn't shoot at you." Then he was gone, swallowed by headlights and uniforms and the ugly machinery of consequences. Later, when the city had finally stopped screaming long enough to listen to its own heartbeat, we stood at the window in my room and watched snow drift past the street lamps. Veronica spoke first. "He thought he could make me a headline," she said. "And you made him a spectacle," I replied. Her mouth curved. "Spectacles are expensive." I stayed quiet long enough for the silence to become honest. "Elsie died because she tried to buy safety with information," I said. Veronica's gaze lowered. "Yes." "And you?" I asked. "What did you buy with your London trick, with all that brilliance?" She looked at me properly then, no performance, no mask. just that hard clarity that makes men mistake her for cruel when she is simply refusing to be lied to. "I didn't buy safety," she said. "I bought time." "And what do you do with it?" A pause, one beat, two. "I decide," she said softly, "who gets to keep me." I should have replied with something clever, something brave, something suitable. Instead, I said the plain thing, because plain things are sometimes the only honest ones left. "Then let me be kept," I said. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger but in assessment, as if she were deciding whether I understood what I'd offered. "You don't know what you're asking," she murmured. "I do," I said. "I'm asking for the part you don't sell." For a moment she said nothing. Then she stepped closer, not dramatically, not tenderly, but with the quiet decision that has always been her most dangerous habit. "Arthur," she said very softly, "if you make me sentimental, I will blame you for it." "I'll accept the charge," I replied. Outside, Chicago kept pretending it could wash itself clean with speeches. Inside, we were still alive, still inconvenient, still refusing to play the part they wrote. And somewhere in a file that would never be pretty, Elsie Morrow was no longer a disposal line. She was evidence, which is the nearest thing this city offers to justice. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of A Bullet for the Headlines. This case was never just about a body in a cheap hotel room. It was about a city that likes its stories tidy, even when the truth is anything but. A dead girl with Veronica's card, a room number chosen to rattle old ghosts, a clean city campaign built on raids, payoffs, and carefully staged villains. All of it designed to turn real lives into a performance the public could applaud without asking who wrote the script. In the end, the danger didn't come from back-alley thugs so much as from men like Leland, Crowe, and Langley, who talk about cleanliness while wading in filth, and who were perfectly willing to use Veronica's past as a ready-made monster for the papers. What we watched in that ballroom was the machinery of respectability laid bare. Ledgers and photographs and disposal notes, a fixer with a gun behind the curtains, and a room full of donors prepared to believe whatever version of events arrived with the right letterhead, until O'Rourke, O'Leary, and Veronica forced them to see the other story. If this kind of mystery speaks to you, the ones where the bullets matter, but so do the headlines, and the way reputations are bought, sold, and weaponized, let us know in the comments, and tell us what corners of Veronica's Chicago you'd like us to walk into next. More crooked philanthropists, more clean-up men with dirty hands, more battles over who gets to decide what a woman's name means, or something entirely different. These full-length cases take a great deal of time to write, record, and produce, and they only exist because some of you choose to support Nocturnal Tales on Patreon or with one-off tips on Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal. If you want to see more news stories in the coming weeks and months, more Veronica, more Hastings, more nights in cities that don't forgive easily, that support is what makes it possible. All the links are in the description. For now, thank you again for staying with us to the last line. Until the next case, be careful whose cleanliness you trust, pay attention to who's holding the camera as well as the gun, and remember, in cities like this, the most dangerous shot is often the one that turns a life into a headline.